The check was folded once. $700. I stared at it while my sister's engagement party glittered behind me. Crystal chandeliers, catered trays, a slideshow of her childhood photos looping on a projector screen. Earlier that evening, my father had announced their gift to her. $340,000, he said proudly. Applause filled the room. When my turn came, my mother pressed the small envelope into my palm and leaned close. That's all you deserve. Her perfume smelled like lilies. The room kept laughing. Have you ever felt humiliation so sharp you had to stand perfectly still just to hold yourself together? I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I placed the envelope on the table. And I left. I drove home slowly that night. The streetlights blurred against the windshield, soft and golden, like they were trying to make everything look gentler than it was. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, but my chest felt tight, not from anger, not yet, from clarity. Growing up, my sister's milestones were events. Mine were acknowledgments. When she got into college, my parents hosted a dinner. When I graduated, my father shook my hand in the kitchen and said, "Good, now you won't depend on anyone." When she bought her first car, they helped with the down payment. When I bought mine, I worked double shifts for 6 months and listened to my mother say, "Well, you've always been the independent one." It sounded like praise. It wasn't. Independence was their way of investing less in me. Have you ever noticed how favoritism hides behind compliments? "You're strong." "You don't need as much." "You'll be fine." I believed it for years. I built routines around it. I paid my own rent early. I fixed things in my apartment without asking for help. I learned to celebrate myself quietly. My birthday dinners were small. My achievements stayed on LinkedIn posts my parents never commented on. Meanwhile, my sister's life unfolded like a sponsored event. Destination vacations, professional photographers, coordinated family outfits. And I told myself it didn't matter. That night, though, something shifted. $700 wasn't about money. It was a valuation, a number assigned to my worth. I reached my apartment and sat in the dark for a long time before turning on the lights. When the refrigerator hummed softly, the air smelled faintly of laundry detergent from the basket I'd left folded on the couch. Ordinary, peaceful, mine. I opened my laptop and checked my savings account. Not impressive, but stable. I had been building something quietly for years. Certifications, side contracts, late-night freelance work after my full-time job. Small investments I researched carefully instead of gambling on trends. No one clapped for those steps. No one needed to. Because they were mine. The next morning, my mother texted, "You left early. People noticed." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Did I hurt you?" Just image control. I stared at the message and didn't reply. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. What if silence wasn't weakness? What if it was the beginning of withdrawal? That week, I declined Sunday dinner. Then the following week, when my sister called to talk about floral arrangements for her ceremony, I kept the conversation brief, neutral, polite. She didn't notice the distance. Why would she? She had never needed to compete for oxygen in that room, but something in me had stopped trying. I wasn't angry. I was finished asking. And that quiet decision would change everything in ways none of them expected. Looking back, the signs had always been there. They just felt small at the time. When my sister announced her engagement, my mother cried for 3 days. When she started a group chat called The Wedding Dream, every vendor was discussed, every fabric sample photographed, every cake tasting documented like a historic event. When I mentioned, casually, that I had been seeing someone seriously, my father nodded and said, "That's nice." That was it. No questions, no curiosity. I told myself they were just busy. But busy with what? The favoritism was never loud. It was structured. At family dinners, my sister sat beside my mother. I usually ended up near the edge of the table, refilling water glasses or clearing plates. When financial topics came up, my father would turn toward her and say, "We'll help you with that." To me, he would say, "You're practical. You'll figure it out." Have you ever been praised in a way that quietly excludes you? "You don't need us as much." It sounded empowering. It wasn't. 2 months before the ceremony, my mother asked me to help review vendor contracts. "You're better with numbers," she said. I spent 3 evenings comparing pricing structures and deposit schedules. I flagged unnecessary markups. I even suggested negotiating terms to save them money. My father responded in the group chat, "Your sister deserves the best," as if I had suggested less. That was the moment I felt something cool settle inside me. It wasn't jealousy. It was recognition. I had always been the operational daughter, the useful one, and the one who solved problems quietly while someone else received applause. When the final payment transfers were made, I overheard my parents discussing it in the kitchen. "It's a big investment," my mother said. "She'll marry well," my father replied. "It's worth it." I stood in the hallway holding a dish towel. Marry well, worth it. What did that make me? A cost center? Later that week, my sister asked me if I could help assemble gift bags for the ceremony guests. I did. I tied ribbons around small boxes while she scrolled through honeymoon villa options. She didn't mean harm. That's what made it harder. She had never needed to see the imbalance. Privilege rarely feels unfair when you're standing on top of it. The night of the ceremony gift announcement, when my parents revealed the $340,000 contribution publicly, the room erupted in admiration. I watched the expressions: pride, approval, status. Then came my envelope, $700, and delivered quietly, privately. No applause required. I remember thinking in that exact moment, this isn't about her. It's about me accepting this role. How long had I been cooperating with my own minimization? Driving home that night, I realized something else. They had invested in her future. I had invested in mine. And unlike their check, mine didn't depend on approval. That thought stayed with me. It was small, but it was steady. And steady, I was beginning to understand. It is more powerful than loud. The pattern stopped feeling accidental. It began to feel designed. A week after the ceremony, my parents hosted a brunch to celebrate the future. My sister's name was printed on the menu cards. Her fiancé's family was seated at the center table. I was placed near the window, alone. Not intentionally cruel, just positioned. My mother handed my sister a leather-bound folder during dessert. Inside were copies of the payment confirmations, a breakdown of expenses, and a small note that read, "We believe in you." I watched my sister cry softly. I smiled. No one noticed I hadn't been given a chair at the main table until halfway through the meal. Someone shuffled seating. Apologies were whispered. But the message had already settled. Value is often displayed in logistics. I drove home that afternoon and opened my own spreadsheet. My savings, my investments, my long-term plan. For the first time, I saw it clearly. While they were pouring money outward, I had been building inward. Certifications completed, business contracts secured, a small property fund quietly growing, a separate account no one knew about. I hadn't built it to prove anything. But suddenly it felt like proof. Have you ever realized the system you were trying to win wasn't designed for you? I stopped attending the group chat discussions. I muted the notifications. I no longer volunteered for planning tasks. No announcement. No drama, just absence. My mother called one evening. "You've been distant." Her tone wasn't concerned. It was puzzled. "I've been busy," I replied. That part was true. I had begun working with a real estate consultant. Not for a mansion, not for status, for ownership. Something with walls that would never whisper. That's all you deserve. The more I withdrew, the clearer the pattern became. Their generosity flowed where admiration flowed. And admiration flowed where compliance lived. I wasn't angry anymore. I was observing, and observation creates options. The last time I visited their house before everything changed, I stood in the doorway and looked at the framed family photos. My sister in the center of most of them, me at the edges, still smiling. I wondered quietly, how many times had I mistaken tolerance for love? And that question followed me home. 2 months after the ceremony, I signed my first property contract. It wasn't dramatic, no champagne, no social media announcement, just a quiet signature at a polished wooden desk while the realtor slid papers across to me. The house wasn't extravagant, but it had high ceilings, wide windows, and something I hadn't felt in a long time: space. Space without comparison. Space without ranking. When I walked through it the first time, the floor still smelled faintly of fresh varnish. Dust particles drifted through sunlight coming in from the front windows. The rooms echoed slightly when I spoke. Empty. Ready. Mine. Have you ever stepped into a place and felt like it didn't judge you? I didn't tell my parents, not immediately. For once, I wanted something that existed outside their evaluation. While my sister was planning honeymoon details and posting professional engagement photos, I was meeting contractors. I reviewed flooring samples. I negotiated appliance packages. I calculated long-term property tax. It wasn't glamorous, but it was grounding. The independence they had always praised me for was finally being used on my own terms. Occasionally, my mother would send updates about ceremony payments. "We've finalized the lighting package. Your father added extra floral installations." Each message carried a subtle pride. Each message reminded me of the number: $340,000. I didn't resent it anymore, because I was beginning to see something else. They invested in moments. I was investing in permanence. Have you ever realized that long-term thinking doesn't make noise? The renovations finished just before the year ended. I moved in quietly. No housewarming party, no announcement. I unpacked dishes alone in the kitchen. I stood in the living room at night and listened to the quiet hum of the heating system. It wasn't loneliness, it was ownership. One Sunday afternoon, my sister called unexpectedly. She sounded tired. "Planning is exhausting," she said. "It's like there's always more to pay for." I listened. She described vendor disputes, additional guest requests, unexpected fees. "It'll be worth it," she said, convincing herself more than me. "Maybe," I replied gently. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about the envelope. But the difference in our trajectories felt heavier now. 2 years passed. Her ceremony photos faded into curated albums. My property appreciated. I refinanced strategically. I started a small consulting firm from my spare bedroom. It grew, quietly, steadily. I never posted about it. I never framed it as a response. But growth has a way of becoming visible on its own. And one afternoon, everything shifted. I was standing in my front yard reviewing landscaping plans when I heard a car slow down on the street. A familiar car. My parents' car. When they weren't visiting me, they were driving through the neighborhood on their way somewhere else. The car slowed, stopped. My sister leaned forward in the passenger seat, staring at the house. Her face changed. "Mom, why don't I have that?" I heard it through the open window. Clear, unfiltered. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being compared. The car idled for a moment longer than necessary. I could see my mother's profile through the windshield. Her posture stiffened. My father kept his hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed forward as if pretending not to notice what was right in front of him. But my sister didn't look away. She stared at the house, at the landscaped front yard, the fresh paint, the quiet confidence of something built, not gifted. "Mom, why don't I have that?" Her voice cracked slightly. Not angry, not accusatory, just confused. And confusion carries weight when expectations were built differently. Have you ever watched someone confront the limits of what they were promised? My mother said something I couldn't hear clearly, but I saw the shift in her expression. Defensiveness, justification, comparison. The car door opened. My sister stepped out first. She hadn't noticed me standing near the side of the porch, partially hidden by the tree. Her heels clicked softly against the pavement. "It's bigger than ours," she said. Ours. I remembered hearing about their townhouse. And compact, elegant, expensive, but not permanent. Not owned outright. I walked forward slowly. They saw me at the same time. Surprise flickered across their faces. Not the warm kind, the recalculating kind. "You live here?" my sister asked. "Yes," I said. No pride in my voice, no performance, just fact. My mother stepped out next. "You never told us," she said. "I wasn't asked," I replied. Silence spread across the driveway. Not hostile, just heavy. My sister turned in a slow circle, taking in the property. "When did this happen?" she asked. "Over time," I said, because that was the truth. Nothing about this house was sudden. It was years of discipline, negotiation, restraint. While they celebrated spectacle, I built structure. Have you ever realized that consistency doesn't photograph well, but it compounds quietly? My sister's face softened. "It must have cost a lot," she said. "It did," I answered. And you did it alone?" "Yes." That word landed differently now. Alone had once been framed as a disadvantage. Now it sounded like ownership. My mother shifted her purse on her shoulder. "We gave you support," she said carefully. $700. I didn't repeat the number. I didn't need to. "I invested it," I replied calmly. Technically true. I had deposited it into my business account as symbolic seed money. It had multiplied far beyond its origin. Not because of generosity, but because of direction. My sister looked at the front door. "You're lucky," she said. Lucky. I considered the word. Late nights studying market trends, weekends reviewing contracts, years of saying no to temporary pleasures. Was that luck? Or was it alignment? Have you ever noticed how people call discipline luck when they didn't witness the process? My father finally spoke. You've done well." It was the first time I had heard those words from him without qualification. No, for someone like you. No, despite. Just done well. The shift was subtle, but real. My sister glanced back at the car. Her ceremony had been magnificent. The photos were still admired. The $340,000 had been spent beautifully. But beauty fades faster than equity. And now, the hierarchy felt unstable. Not because I challenged it. Because the numbers spoke for themselves. They didn't come inside. That surprised me. For years, I had imagined some dramatic confrontation. Raised voices, accusations, a full accounting of who gave what to whom. Instead, they stood in the driveway like visitors who weren't sure they had permission to approach the door. My sister wrapped her arms around herself. "I thought," she began, then stopped. "What?" I asked gently. "I thought Mom and Dad helped you too." There it was, like the assumption, the narrative she had grown up inside. I looked at my mother. She avoided my eyes. "We supported you differently," she said carefully. Differently. $700 felt like an echo in my mind. Have you ever noticed how language softens imbalance? "You've always been independent," she continued. "We believed in that." I almost smiled. Belief had been their substitute for investment. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Because something had shifted inside me long before this driveway moment. "I'm independent," I said. "But independence doesn't mean less worthy." Silence. Not defensive this time, just processing. My sister looked up at the house again. "It must feel good," she said quietly. "It feels steady," I replied. That word mattered. Steady, not flashy, not curated for applause, just solid. Have you ever realized that stability doesn't compete? It simply exists? My father finally met my gaze. "We didn't expect you to build something like this," he said. I considered his words. They had never expected me to demand more, never expected me to leave early, never expected me to stop participating in the comparison. And they certainly hadn't expected this outcome. "I didn't build it to prove anything," I said calmly. That part was true. At some point, the motivation had shifted. It wasn't about surpassing my sister. It wasn't about correcting the number. It was about refusing to internalize it. $700 had once felt like a verdict. Now, it felt like a catalyst. My sister's eyes were glossy. "Mom," she said softly, "why didn't you help her the way you helped me?" The question hung in the air, like something fragile. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, shifted her weight. There was no simple answer. Favoritism rarely has a clean explanation. Sometimes it's habit. Sometimes it's comfort. Sometimes it's proximity to the child who demands more. Have you ever wondered how different your path might have been if the resources had been equal? I didn't interrupt. I didn't supply the answer for them, because this wasn't my confrontation to carry. My sister looked smaller in that moment, not because she lacked something, but because she was seeing something for the first time. Comparison can feel empowering when you're ahead. It feels destabilizing when the direction changes. "We thought you didn't need as much," my mother finally said. "Need again." I stepped closer. "I didn't need more," I said. "I needed fairness." Fairness isn't always financial. It's acknowledgement, it's presence. It's investment without ranking. The wind moved softly through the trees. My father cleared his throat. "You've done well," he repeated. And this time it didn't sound reluctant. It sounded reflective. Not pride exactly, but awareness. My sister wiped her eyes. "I wish I had something like this," she admitted. "You can," I said gently. Because the truth was simple. Nothing about this house was inherited. Nothing about it was handed over in a leather-bound folder. It was built, quietly, steadily, and that's something anyone can choose. Once they stop expecting applause first. Have you ever realized that sometimes the greatest response isn't confrontation? It's construction? And they stood there a moment longer. Then they returned to the car. No argument, no explosion, just a quiet recalibration. And as they drove away, I didn't feel victorious. I felt complete. For a long time after that afternoon, I kept thinking about the way my sister had said it. "Mom, why don't I have that?" There hadn't been envy in her voice. There had been confusion, as if the equation she had grown up believing in suddenly didn't balance anymore. Money in, admiration out, an investment in ceremony, security guaranteed. But life doesn't work like a ledger. That day in my driveway wasn't about a house. It was about perspective. Have you ever watched someone realize that comfort and stability are not the same thing? In the weeks that followed, the tone in our family shifted. Not dramatically, subtly. My mother started asking different questions when we spoke. "Oh, how is your business doing?" "What are your plans for the next few years?" Not, "Are you seeing anyone serious?" Not, "When will you settle down?" For the first time, her curiosity felt directed at my growth, not my compliance. My sister called one evening. No ceremony updates, no subtle comparisons, just a quiet conversation. "I didn't know," she admitted. "About what?" I asked. "That they gave you so little." I assumed it was similar. Assumption is powerful when you benefit from it. I didn't say anything. I replied. "Why not?" I paused, because that question required honesty. I thought I had to earn more. The line went quiet. Have you ever believed that if you worked harder, stayed calmer, achieved more, you'd eventually be treated equally? It doesn't work that way. Effort doesn't correct imbalance if the system never intended fairness. I never asked them to do that, she said softly. I know, I replied. That mattered. This wasn't about blaming her. Of course, she had simply lived inside the comfort she was offered. I had chosen to build outside of it. 2 months later, my sister started working with a financial advisor. She told me about it casually. I want to understand investments, she said, not just events. There was no resentment in her tone, just recalibration. My parents visited my house properly for the first time that spring. They walked through each room slowly, not assessing, observing. My father ran his hand along the kitchen counter. You did this without help, he said. Yes, I answered. It wasn't a challenge, it was a statement. And something in his posture softened. We underestimated you, my mother said quietly. Underestimated. Not unloved, not unwanted, just misjudged. That distinction mattered more than an apology would have. Because I hadn't built this life to force regret. I built it to avoid dependence. Yeah, have you ever realized that the greatest power is no longer needing validation from the people who withheld it? Over time, the hierarchy that once felt fixed began to dissolve. Not completely, not perfectly, but noticeably. Family gatherings felt less structured around comparison, less ranking, more equal. My sister's townhouse remained beautiful, but she stopped describing it as forever. She started describing it as a step. That shift told me everything. She wasn't crying over what I had anymore. She was planning what she could build, and that was the real change. As for me, the house became more than property. It became proof, not of superiority, not of revenge. Proof that valuation from others is optional. The $700 had once echoed in my mind like a sentence. That's all you deserve. But now when I think of it, I see something different. It was the moment I stopped waiting for someone else to assign my worth. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the smallest number becomes the turning point? If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been quietly ranked lower than someone else, remember this. You don't have to argue your value. You can build it, brick by brick, investment by investment, choice by choice, like if you've ever chosen construction over confrontation. And tell me, if you were handed that envelope, what would you have done? Comment below.